The following podcast is a presentation of This Is Infamous. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to this week's edition of Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. I'm your host, Billy Donnelly, who you can find at JoeBlow.com and thisisinfamous.com. And as we do every week on this particular show, we talk wrestling. No fanboys speak. This is an intelligent wrestling conversation, taking the latest happenings in the world of wrestling, putting some logic behind them, putting some perspective behind them, putting some reason behind them, and trying to really help you form an opinion, an educated opinion, as to what we're going to talk about this week. No mass hysteria, no craziness. This is the Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. So I want to thank you very much for downloading, streaming, however it is that you're listening to this particular episode. However it is that you found it, however it is that you located us, whether it was on thisisinfamous.com, whether it was on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Google Play, on Blueberry, on SoundCloud, however it is, keep it up and keep spreading the word for us. Make sure you subscribe to the show so that you get the show delivered to you week in and week out. Make sure you rate the show, comment on the show, give us some feedback. Let us know what you think of the show. Let me know what you think of the job I'm doing. This is where we can keep doing it, or I can try to get better. And if you just want to hate on me, I don't care. You've been booing Roman Reigns for however long. He doesn't seem to care. He's still getting paid. So you can boo me however much you want. I'm just going to keep doing the show. But some feedback, it's always nice. Much later in the week, doing this show than I typically prefer. I usually like to get you the show early in the week, midweek at the latest if possible, to sort of hit you up with the biggest stuff that sort of set the week off. However, there was a number of different things that came up this week that sort of prevented that. Number one, I had some severe plumbing issues going on in my house. I had flooding in one of my bathrooms one day, which really sort of threw my schedule into disarray for the week. But beyond that, I've been traveling around the state of Florida to attend some wrestling shows that I want to be able to talk about on this particular episode. And we will. We're going to get into plenty of it. I was at the first taping of the Cruiserweight Classic. 16 matches of cruiserweights, which make up the first round of the CWC. I was also at the next round of NXT Tapings, which featured 2 out of 3 falls for the NXT Tag Team Championship between the Revival and American Alpha, as well as the dream match of Shinsuke Nakamura and Finn Balor. So I'm going to talk about that. And I was also at this week's SmackDown tapings for the WWE as they came down to Miami. So I witnessed what was going on there. So we're going to talk about those shows. We'll also talk about Raw, talk about Brock Lesnar a little bit. Dave Bautista in the news. Lots of things to cover. But I guess we'll start at the beginning, which is sort of how I kicked off my week, or at least the past week and change. And that would be the Cruiserweight Classic. I decided that I was going to make a road trip up to Orlando, up to Full Sail University, to Full Sail Live, to attend back-to-back days of tapings at the venue. Kicked off by the Cruiserweight Classic and then followed up by NXT Tapings. So with some finagling, with some maneuvering, with some people getting my back, shout out to Cody and Jenny and Izzy, I was able to make a go of it. Now, the Cruiserweight Classic very interesting setup for the WWE to sort of embrace. Taking 32 cruiserweights of 205 pounds or less. You had to make weight in order to make the field. And sort of showcasing those who otherwise may not get their due in the WWE. The WWE doesn't have a cruiserweight division. Last time we really saw a cruiserweight division at its peak was back in the heyday of WCW when they were doing something different. ECW did not have a cruiserweight division, but really did feature a lot of cruiserweight talent that WCW at one point really started to bring into their fold. And whether it was down in Mexico with the luchador style or out in Japan, a lot of talented cruiserweights have made their mark on professional wrestling or in professional wrestling over the years. And now, with what we see in the current state of professional wrestling, whether it's Lucha Underground or New Japan or what's going on down in Mexico with AAA, there is ton of top-notch cruiserweight talent that doesn't really get its due outside of quote-unquote smart marks who are going out of their way to try and find the next thing that nobody knows about. So it's a cool concept for the WWE to sort of embrace this and give talent that the mainstream may not otherwise know about, give them a platform to showcase what they can do, and as a result, possibly open up the door to bring some of those talented individuals into the WWE fold, or possibly into the NXT fold, where that athletic brand that cruiserweights deal in would be welcomed. So when you have someone like a Kota Ibushi or Lince Dorado, or even currently on the NXT brand, someone like Johnny Gargano or Tommaso Ciampa, guys who may be known sort of on the independents or in a global sense, but who haven't been seen by the quote-unquote WWE universe. This is a great chance for them to really find new avenues to promote themselves. Now, the thing with the Cruiserweight Classic, at least here in the first round, is because you have 32, there's clearly a separation in talent. There are guys who are much better than others. Guys who are far greener than others. You go watch that first round, I'm going to tell you right now, you look at Ken Johnson, that's a green dude right there. Clearly inexperienced. Hold his own enough. I believe in his match against Tozawa. But a dude who seems to be there to fill out the field because they need 32 guys and they couldn't necessarily find 32 top-notch individuals, so they found, 10, 12, 14, and then filled out the rest with guys who need to drop the matches. You can't have 32 perfectly evenly matched cruiserweights because then it's hard to decide who's going to win or lose. So you got to have some guys out there who are kind of just cannon fodder. And then there'll be guys who surprise you. And I'll bring up one distinct surprise who is kind of now an underdog in the field, but a popular guy nonetheless who sort of won over the crowd, won me over. There's a guy I looked at and was like, who the hell is this guy and why is he in this tournament? And very quickly won me over. But the way that the Cruiserweight Classic is set up is really, really fascinating. Number one, I think they have the perfect commentary team to sort of sell what's going on here. With Mauro Ranallo, he knows wrestling, he calls wrestling, he's good at the play-by-play of wrestling, he's able to sort of draw you into the emotions of a bout and tell a story. Perfect guy for that. Just a very intelligent wrestling commentator. Perfect guy to call play-by-play for the Cruiserweight Classic. And he's joined by Daniel Bryan, who gets this style as well and can add something to the conversation as far as what the competitors are going through, how the matches are being put together, and sort of sell it as an athletic competition, as a sport, which is what the Cruiserweight Classic is meant to do. In the way that it's presented, it's meant to be taken as a serious competition. The guys are brought to the center of the ring. The referee has instructions for them. They shake hands. They go upon their match. When it is over, they're brought to the center of the ring, sort of like boxing. The hand is raised to the winner. They perhaps shake hands again in a sign of good sportsmanship, and they go on their way. It's treated very cleanly, very respectfully, very gracefully. And it's a nice way of putting together these contests. Now, I look forward to watching it on TV, even having sat through like 4 hours of tapings to get through 60 matches. I look forward to watching it again on television to hear how the commentary sort of brings it all together. Now, Daniel Bryan being there was a great moment. I don't know if you've seen it already or not. I was able to catch video of his entrance. It went up on my Instagram, thekid469 on Instagram. I know Reddit picked it up. The video was sort of everywhere of the pop that Daniel Bryan got coming in and getting sort of yes chants and him sort of really embracing it. I know he was really reluctant to do it, having to retire the way he did, wanted sort of nothing to do with wrestling, really wanted to be at a distance, didn't want this thing in his face that he loved but could no longer do. But you could kind of get a sense of the emotional impact of being tasked with the responsibility of calling this action with Mauro Ranallo and how that sort of gave him a new lease on life in wrestling. He may not be able to compete, may not be medically cleared to step into a ring, forced to retire due to head injury and concussions, and it's a horrible thing. But sometimes you're able to find something else that you're good at in order to still be part of it. I mean, look at Corey Graves and what he's managed to do with NXT and the WWE, having to retire in similar fashion because of concussions, and has really embraced the role that he's been given, not necessarily a role that he wanted, but a role that he has found his spot in as a heel commentator. Sort of like a Jesse the Body Ventura after he had to step away from the ring, couldn't handle the load of it anymore, became one of the all-time greats on the mic. So I think as Daniel Bryan sort of eases into this, if he continues to get a chance to do this, I think pairing him up with Mauro Ranallo is really a great team. And I don't know how he would want to handle the sort of the travel of it. I know he wants to start a family with Brie, who also got off the road. But if when the draft came around, you gave me Mauro Ranallo and Daniel Bryan and Corey Graves together on commentary for SmackDown, that team would kill. I would watch SmackDown over Raw specifically to hear that commentator team week in and week out. I know you got Byron Saxton and you're trying to make him work and you're trying to have him pull double duty, but when the brand split comes and you're going to do something different, I think Mauro Ranallo, Daniel Bryan, and Corey Graves. Oh, that's a killer lineup on the mic. Killer lineup. Speaking of which, I got some brand split stuff I want to talk about a little bit later now that I jog my memory. But we'll get into that. We'll get into some brand split stuff because I got something interesting I want to bring up. Some interesting thing I'm hearing that I think you'll really want to know. We'll get into that. But as for the Cruiserweight Classic, the first round, it kind of is what it is. You got to weed some guys out. So it sort of sets the tone for the rest of the tournament, but the matches are only going to get better the deeper into the tournament they go. The narrower the field gets as you really separate the men from the boys, figuratively speaking, of course. As you really get the cream of the crop rising and seeing the difference between somebody who's good, somebody who's really good, and those who are great and exceptional. You know, Johnny Gargano is a guy who I think really benefits from this tournament because while he's mostly teamed up with Tommaso Ciampa in NXT, I think if people get a chance to see what he can do in the ring as an individual, that will only help his stock rise as an NXT superstar. And he has a tremendous match in the first round, surprisingly, with his tag team partner, Tommaso Ciampa. Great story to be told there, so you make sure you keep an eye out for that one. You're also going to want to watch Kota Ibushi, who I think is the favorite to win this tournament. Who really does look like a man amongst boys when you really sort of see just his presence alone. It's pretty magnificent. So you're going to keep a lookout for that. For me, I thought the match of the first round was Dorado and Ali, and that's one you absolutely want to check out. And then my underdog that I mentioned earlier, Jack Gallagher. I know his name seems kind of plain. You're going to watch him. He's kind of pale looking. Sort of strange looking tights. A mustache that looks like he should inform all of his neighbors that he lives in the neighborhood now. But Jack Gallagher, while on the surface doesn't look like much, when you get to see him in the ring in action, you will find yourself quickly becoming a Jack Gallagher fan. So, don't sleep on the Cruiserweight Classic. Check it out, starting with that first round. Some matches are clearly better than others, but I think you'll get enough out of that first round to then want to see how the second round continues, and how the third round continues, and how we get to one man standing, crown the Cruiserweight Classic champion, or winner, or however it is they want to term it. But overall, pretty good. Pretty good start. So when it starts airing, I believe it's July 12th or 13th, you're going to want to hop on that right away. Now, the next night, we went out for the NXT tapings. So you have several weeks of shows. I think only 3 this time around. And the 3 big matches that are lined up in future weeks are Bayley versus Nia Jax, 2 out of 3 falls for the NXT Tag Team Championship between the Revival and American Alpha, and the Dream match that's been alluded to in previous weeks now on NXT programming, Shinsuke Nakamura versus Finn Balor. Now, I'm not going to get into spoilers because I think you're going to want to watch everything that NXT has in the coming weeks. I'll never tell you not to watch NXT. Those weeks don't exist where I'm like, I don't watch NXT. It's not very good this week. Just about every week, you could find something on NXT where you look at it and you're like, man, that's really good. Or, man, I really like that. Or, I like watching that guy. Or, I like watching her. There's always something. But I will tell you, in future weeks, the 2 out of 3 falls match, get your sights set on that one. Target that one. Carve out an hour of your night to sit and watch that one. Get a cold beverage, get a beer, get some popcorn, some chips. Pee before you even start. Get yourself situated on the couch. Maybe even have some friends over because it's a pay-per-view quality match. Those guys just work remarkably well together. Dash and Dawson, Gable and Jordan, those 4 guys just gel unbelievably well. And when you get to here, 2 out of 3 falls, having that match sort of built upon their other matches from the 2 takeovers, from TakeOver Dallas and for TakeOver The End, one that had American Alpha capturing the title and then the Revival regaining it back. This match sort of builds on the stories that those have told. It's like a beautiful wrestling trilogy. Each match exists on its own individually, but when you put them all together in a 3-match structure, it is a beautiful long-form story. Because match 2 picks things from match 1, and match 3 picks things from match 2, and they all sort of build and piggyback on one another, that when you get to this one, the 2 out of 3 falls, you'll recognize things that you saw the other 2, or things that were set up from the other 2 matches. It's a great match to watch. It's tag team wrestling at its finest. These 4 guys just get how to work tag team style. They are a blueprint for tag team wrestling. If you are out there, let's say you work on the independents, let's say you want to get into wrestling, you're getting your start, tag team wrestling sort of interests you, you watch any match with the Revival, any match with American Alpha, and most certainly the matches that they have with each other, and you'll learn years worth of knowledge from watching those 2 tag teams operate. And the 2 out of 3 falls match that you're going to get in the coming weeks on NXT, on the WWE Network, that one is no different. Bayley and Nia Jax, I think, just continues to forward that story, and what I imagine will be Bayley getting her rematch for the NXT Women's Championship against Asuka, which I believe will be coming at TakeOver Brooklyn on SummerSlam weekend in August. I believe they have that much they're going to try and get out of that storyline with Bayley competing in Brooklyn. So while Bayley and Nia Jax, who I'm not crazy about just yet, I think that match is sort of a means to an end that we're going to get down the line. And then the dream match is a must-see. That's why it's a dream match. It lives up to the hype. It lives up to the build. Shinsuke Nakamura versus Finn Balor is a match that any wrestling fan should go out of their way to watch in its entirety. I was lucky to have been there and been able to watch it live and in person. That's a match that I can chalk up in my head and say, damn, I was there. I got to see that in the flesh, right in front of my face. And it did not disappoint. It did not let me down. They were given the time to work. They were given the room to work. They were allowed to tell a story. And they were allowed to give both of those individuals moments that will stick with the NXT universe for years to come. That will be one of those matches that people will look back on and say, remember when Nakamura fought Balor in NXT? Sort of one of those benchmark matches. I don't know if it's a 5-star classic match of the year candidate. But I guarantee you will get into it with the quickness. You will not get out of it throughout. And you will ride the wave all the way to the end. And while there's been plenty of speculation as to whether or not Finn Balor will be getting a call up to the main roster with the brand extension, with the WWE Draft coming up, win or lose, and I'm not going to tell you how it went down, if that was his last match in NXT, if that was his last match in front of the Full Sail crowd, it was a beautiful send-off, a beautiful swan song for him to have as his last moments at NXT. So there's that bit of business from my NXT attendance. The other thing that I want to comment on, and I've commented on it before when I've been in attendance at an NXT show. And it has to do with the fan base. Now, what I would recommend to you is go out and read. There's a really great article by Tim Cale at workofwrestling.com on how wrestling fans need to be better. The fans that he's mostly talking about who are worse all the time are those who are down at Full Sail and NXT. I sat right there amongst them. Amongst the verbal fans that typically want to chant the shit out of everything at an NXT taping. And I observed them, and I listened to them. And I sort of tried to figure out where they were coming from. And what I could tell you from being there is that they just can't be quiet. They can't just sit there and watch something, even if just for a few moments. Silence makes them uncomfortable. They need to constantly have some kind of diarrhea coming out of their mouth at all times. Now, look, I respect the hell out of the energy and the passion. But sometimes, in life, you just need to shut the fuck up and appreciate what's in front of you. Silence is not always all bad. Sometimes it's okay to just sit quietly and soak in the moment and appreciate it. You don't have to constantly have something coming out of your mouth for the purpose of hearing yourself talk. Because that's what happens. I've listened to them. They try so desperately to constantly come up with something. I heard talk of trying to get a American Alpha chant together to the melody of the Team America theme song. I heard a guy take credit for a "Let's Go" chant that came together twice, in which case he made sure to tell his friends, hey, you know, I got that chant started twice, so when you watch it back on the network, remember that. This is the fan base. This is what they're concerned about. Getting themselves over amongst their friends. Or amongst the watching audience who doesn't give a shit that they started the chant. They just want to be able to sort of take credit on their own. That's their moment of pride. So that when they watch it back, they can be like, haha, I started that chant. As if anybody gives a shit. One guy was asking around if they were going to start chants shitting on Brooklyn again, knowing that soon enough the announcements would start coming in for matches that will take place at TakeOver Brooklyn over SummerSlam weekend. This is the amount of thought and coordination that goes into this. It's nothing organic. It's people trying to rally support together amongst their friends for other chants. It's not a guy who's just standing up who wants to chant, "Let's go Bailey." It's a guy who's trying to tell all his friends of the chant he's going to start so that they can try and help him get it going. So that then he could pat himself on the back and say, look, I got that chant going. How awesome am I? That's sort of the state of fandom. I think the NXT crowd is a microcosm of that, but it's a part of a bigger problem. Because all they want is the recognition that they did this thing. And they will try so desperately to get it. It's kind of sad. It's definitely desperate. So that was my experience at Full Sail for those two tapings. So I think in the coming weeks, whether it's the Cruiserweight Classic or what you're going to get as part of NXT, definitely tune in. Go out of your way to watch the matches that are going to put out on the network, because you're going to get a lot of good wrestling content to sink your teeth into. All right. Speaking of NXT, and let me table that. Let me talk about Raw first, and then I'll talk about sort of the draft. Because there is a note that I really want to get into concerning the brand extension and the draft. But I want to talk about Raw first. So this was really the first opportunity on Raw that the WWE had to address the Roman Reigns suspension, which we talked about on last week's episode. Roman Reigns, in violation of the company's wellness policy, suspended for 30 days, off programming, still scheduled for time in the main event at Battleground. And there was a lot of curiosity as to how and if the WWE would even address it on their TV shows. Because to not have Roman Reigns for the next few weeks without anybody saying anything would seem kind of odd. And so Monday Night Raw opened with Seth Rollins going a little meta on Roman Reigns in his opening promo, talking about how he did not deserve to be there in the main event of Battleground. How this was the opportunity for him to now have a one-on-one match with the new champion, Dean Ambrose, for the WWE title. Now, I thought some of it was a little forced, sort of going through Roman Reigns' tweet. although it makes sense to sort of rub his nose in it, given the stories rumbling around backstage that Roman Reigns was forced to apologize to the entire roster for his actions before he was sent on his way into suspension. So while I'll give them some credit for tackling this head on, it also felt a little bit forced. Kind of like everything that they've tried to do with Roman Reigns as of late. It didn't feel like words that Seth Rollins would say. Let's put it that way. Which sort of isn't Seth Rollins' fault. It just goes back to the overall writing of the shows, which is that these superstars, these talents, these individuals are speaking words that they would never say. They're speaking the words of somebody else, and the writing staff doesn't necessarily have the skill to craft those words towards the individual. They're writing speeches, they're writing words, the talent is performing the words, but because the words aren't their own words, it all comes off incredibly awkward. Now, there are some talents who are able to cut their promos in their own words, and it all comes out fine. Anything that The Miz has to say as part of a promo comes out fine. Most of what John Cena says feels like John Cena based off of the character that John Cena has created over the years. Some of it may be juvenile and stupid, but there are parts of it that you go, yeah, well, that feels like John Cena. Seth Rollins still doesn't feel like he has much of a voice. His voice still feels like the voice of other people, so that when he even cuts a promo like this, sort of singling out Roman Reigns and what Roman Reigns did, it doesn't feel like Seth Rollins. So I'll give him an A for effort, but when it came to delivery, I think they still kind of dropped the ball in making Roman Reigns' suspension matter while incorporating it into the programming. So with that, you have other individuals coming down. You have AJ Styles come down. You have John Cena come down, who now also want to join the Battleground main event. And that sort of sets the stage for what's to come on Monday Night Raw, which is Seth Rollins versus John Cena and Dean Ambrose versus AJ Styles, where if Styles and or Cena win their respective matches, they will make their way into the Battleground main event. So we could have a fatal 4-way. We could have a fatal 5-way, depending on how the show shakes out. Now, we don't get any of that. The club interferes and John Cena loses, and AJ Styles manages to drop his match to Ambrose later. And when Raw is over, it all starts to feel, it feels just like everything is as it was when we started the week, right back where we started. We all just came full circle. It was like we got on the treadmill and didn't go anywhere. So while I'm all for forwarding the story, do things to forward the story, Raw this week felt like it did everything to keep us in the same place. Took us in the longest roundabout scenic path to get us right back where we started, which I'm not necessarily a fan of. Doesn't mean you didn't have good matches. Cena and Rollins I thought was fine. Styles and Ambrose I thought was fine. Just didn't forward the story anywhere. Now we're going to get more Cena Styles. That's that much we kind of knew already. What I would imagine we're going to wind up with is at Battleground in July. That will be sort of Cena Styles 2. And then the ultimate blow off, the culmination of their feud will be at SummerSlam with Cena Styles 3. There are other aspects of Raw I thought were fine. You had Paige and Sasha Banks versus Charlotte and Dana Brooke. And anytime you can get Sasha Banks on TV, I'm good with that. You know, we're prepping for Sasha Banks versus Charlotte at SummerSlam, where maybe that'll be the time where they take the belt off of Charlotte. I'm fine actually seeing Paige do some more stuff too, considering how on and off she's been, how stop and go, start and stop she's been on television. Still not a fan of the Dana Brooke packaging with Charlotte, but it is what it is. I still think that she's sort of regressed from where she was in NXT. But they're insistent on packaging her with Charlotte, so we're just going to have to ride it out, as painful as it can be at times. Here's the thing, though, that I found the most concerning about Monday Night Raw, and it's a crutch. I won't say it's concerning, but it's something that I did pick up on. It's a crutch that they continue to use. They've driven it into the ground now to the point where it no longer holds any value. And that is putting all these extra people on commentary. There's no reason whatsoever to constantly bring someone down to ringside to join commentary for a match that they're not involved with. It's very lazy storytelling to have them come down, speak their piece, and either get involved or some sort of stare down. They do it all the time. And all it does is sort of set off a Pavlovian response to know that something is about to happen. There's no longer any surprise to it. In fact, when things happen, it's all very matter of fact now. The surprise comes when nothing does happen, and you go, well, why the hell were they down there to begin with? But there's got to be a more creative way to approach those scenarios than taking somebody, sticking them down at ringside to call a match for somebody they're now currently in a feud with, and then have that be the reason that the feud gets escalated. Do something different, because they send people down to commentary all the time now. It's not like a one-off kind of thing or a rarity, or even people that can handle the commentary would make it a worthwhile addition. Look, I'm not in favor of the commentary team as it is. I think they're pretty weak. I think Cole and Saxton and JBL are pretty weak threesome on commentary. To no end, I find JBL excruciatingly painful to listen to on a weekly basis. When I hear Mauro Ranallo call anything, especially on a pay-per-view during the pre-show, it makes me long for him to stay on the broadcast and them to jettison these other three jackasses from calling the action. And look, I don't have a problem with Byron Saxton. It's just, he's part of the whole. He's a part of the whole. But when I hear an added voice in addition to them, it just further crowds what's happening. And I understand they're now trying to get the feud over, but I would rather you get the feud over by talking about what's happening in the ring and how it then maybe relates to the other person. I don't need the other person there all the time. Once again, show, don't tell. And this is lots of telling. And it's not done in an economical or efficient manner. Usually it's done in a long-winded and uninteresting manner. So can we please stop with the extra people on commentary? And can we also stop with count-out wins? Count-out wins stopped with like Monday Night Wrestling in the 80s. Because it's such a discretionary rule. The referee doesn't consistently enforce a 10 count, that when they do, it just seems ridiculous. Unless you're going to go out of your way to reestablish 10 counts or reestablish disqualifications, which I'd be perfectly okay with if you did, but unless you're going to go out of your way to reestablish them as the standard, you can't just throw them in willy-nilly because you feel like it. Like, oh, well, that's the only way we can get Titus O'Neil over Rusev right now is for him to have a count-out win. I'd rather you have Rusev cheat to win And if Titus O'Neil be mad about that, what is Titus O'Neil thrilled about getting a count-out win for over Rusev? And then for JBL to sort of trump it up as this great accomplishment. He didn't win. He won the match. He didn't win anything, though. He didn't win the title. What the hell is he so pleased about? What kind of great victory is that? Come on now. They had multiple countouts. Just not very good. And once again, you have things that just don't make sense. You had Sheamus teaming up with Alberto Del Rio, which doesn't make any sense, given how the League of Nations ended. So you put all these pieces together, and you're just like, I don't understand. I mean, there's a couple of things going. They still got Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens going. But it feels like it's just going to go. Like, add some story to it. Keep playing up the fact of why these guys hate each other so much. The only way to really do that is through the commentary, but as we all know, the commentary team is not really up to getting that stuff in. So, an okay Raw. I actually found SmackDown this week to be much better. You know, Sasha Banks backstage promo regarding Charlotte and a match that night for Summer Rae, which I thought was absolute fire. If you didn't check out SmackDown this week, go back. Just watch the promo. It's fine. Watch the promo. Sasha Banks just star all over. Just all over Sasha Banks. Just star. You watch her cut this promo, you're like, well, now I get it. This is why people dig her. This is why people chant, we want Sasha all the time. Fire backstage promo. Let her cut more promos regularly. That's how you're going to get the women's division over. That's how you're going to get those matches and those storylines over. Let them cut promos. You also had a really tremendous fatal four-way to find the number one contender for the U.S. title between Sheamus, Alberto Del Rio, Cesaro, and Apollo Crews, with the winner then challenging, with Cesaro winning and then immediately being called into double duty against Rusev in what I thought was a really good story beat. So SmackDown was good this week. And you had a good champion versus champion main event with The Miz and Dean Ambrose. Dean Ambrose, this is where the money's at, man. I've been saying this for months. For as much as they wanted to push Roman Reigns as their babyface guy, Dean Ambrose is the guy that's over. Dean Ambrose is the guy that the fans rally behind. Dean Ambrose is the guy that the fans identify with. They see a piece of their self within Dean Ambrose. He's a guy, he doesn't give a fuck about anything. He's scrappy. He's a fighter. He goes out of his way to earn everything he can. He's not handed anything. People keep knocking him down. He gets back up. He is what people want to be. I mean, I know he's sort of a little bit odd because of the, quote-unquote lunatic fringe gimmick. This dude came out on Miz TV and cut a promo with The Miz eating a sandwich, and people loved it. They ate it up. When's the last time you saw somebody come out and cut a promo eating a sandwich? Last time anybody got food over like that, it was CM Punk with ice cream bars. I know he doesn't have necessarily the look. I know he's not like your picture-perfect, quote-unquote, face of the company, but that guy is over. And that's the guy you want carrying the belt for you. So I know they want to harken back to sort of this storyline of, well, he's a disgrace. We can't believe he's the face of the company. That's exactly the guy you want to be carrying your torch. You wait and see. There's money to be made in Dean Ambrose. He's only up for that guy to go right now. And he's already on the ascent. So pretty good show on SmackDown this week, I thought. So if you usually tune out of SmackDown or you've been waiting for SmackDown to be relevant with the draft going live on there, go back. Watch this week's SmackDown because I think you'll find that it was actually better than Raw. All right, let's talk about the draft since I brought it up. I've been teasing it throughout the show. It looks like we're going to wind up with 2 world championships for the brand split. Right now, the WWE has sort of transitioned without really recognition the title that Dean Ambrose holds. What used to be called the WWE World Heavyweight Championship is now just the WWE Championship. So they dropped the heavyweight out of it, which means we may be seeing the return of the big gold belt that I love, the Ric Flair belt, and maybe sort of the reinstatement of the World Heavyweight Championship. Now, if that's what they want to do, so be it. I think having one world champion would be better because if you want 2 brands that are supposed to be equal or that you're trying to sell as equal with Raw and SmackDown, if they're going to do this thing right, of course. If they're going to do this brand split and this brand extension right, you want them to be equal. You can't have one that's clearly A and one that's clearly the B show, the way that Raw and SmackDown used to be set up. With SmackDown going live, I realize that Raw has been the flagship for a long time, and there are going to be 2 shows that they're going to try and present completely differently, I hope. But if you are going to go and you're going to sell these as 2 equal brands, 2 shows that people have to watch on a regular basis, that they have to buy tickets to see on a regular basis, that they have to tune into the network to watch the pay-per-views on a monthly basis, then you better damn well make them equal. And I don't know that you can do that with 2 world championships. Here's why. Let's say we get to WrestleMania, which we will every single year. Which belt is in the main event at WrestleMania? Is it the WWE Championship or is it the World Heavyweight Championship? Because whatever belt is in the main event, that's the top brand. Because that's the way it works. And the WWE Championship is always the top prize in the land. That's always what we're told. This is the grand prize of the industry. Everybody wants to be the WWE Champion. So by incorporating 2 belts right out of the gate, through no fault of their own, just by the way that they structure them against each other, clearly there is going to be one that is above the other, and that sets up inequality amongst your 2 brands. What do we do when the Royal Rumble comes around? And with the Royal Rumble, somebody decides who they're going to challenge at WrestleMania for the title. Well, guess what? They can't pick both belts. They can only challenge for one. And whatever belt that they challenge for, that's the one. That's the top prize. And if that's the one that doesn't go in the main event, that just means that your talent isn't quite intelligent. So there are a number of different factors that sort of go into those belts. Which is why I think only one championship, only one women's championship, only one tag team championship. And figure out how you have those champions featured on shows in programs across both. Or maybe one at a time. Maybe they alternate. But I don't know that this necessarily helps set up even brands by having 2 championships when one will clearly be inferior to the other. But I want to get into one other thing regarding the draft. A lot of anticipation about the draft. A lot of excitement about the draft. Lots of hope and optimism about how the rosters will be set up, new programs being split or set up, new talent being called up from NXT. Maybe we'll get SmackDown being totally different from Raw, and as a result, we'll get a show that for those who aren't fans of Raw, maybe they'll get something geared more towards their sensibilities. We won't know until these two shows are set up, with the live draft taking place on that first SmackDown. But, and this is where I find people might need to temper their expectations a little bit. I've had some conversations with those in the know. And while things have not been finalized, while there are ideas being formulated and tossed around, they're still putting together how this whole thing is going to come together with Raw and SmackDown. One of the things that I have been told, and I can't go into any specifics at this moment in time, is that the draft will surprise you. Because it will not go as you might expect. Particularly when it comes to talent being called up to the main roster from NXT. Now look, I was at SmackDown this week. I was there live. I saw who's over. And those who are over the most are some of the freshest talent coming up from NXT. Recent call-ups. Guys like Sami Zayn. Women like Sasha Banks. Enzo and Big Cass. The Lucha Dragons. You wouldn't believe how over they are. And Dean Ambrose. Those are the most over talents. So I know there's sort of this belief that there's going to be this influx of talent coming up from NXT that will sort of help save everyone, save everything. Like a Y2J sort of save us. Influx of talent that gets promoted. And I hate to break it to you, but I don't think that's going to happen. What I have been told is that you will be surprised in a number of ways by who is called up from NXT and who stays in NXT. If you look at NXT and you think they're going to gut the entire top tier of talent there and bring them all up, you are mistaken. Because I don't think that that's going to happen. I think there will be some people that stay back down there, and there will be some that get called up. Someone like Finn Balor, I think, will be called up. A team like American Alpha, I think, may be called up. The Revival, I think they're sticking around. Samoa Joe, I think he's sticking around. Austin Aries, I think he's sticking around. Someone like No Way Jose, who's fresh on the scene, he may get a call up. And the biggest name of all that I think is going to stay in NXT, and I'm going to explain to you why right now, is Bayley. And I know how disappointed that leaves some people because they say, but Billy, it's Bayley. The other 3 of the 4 horsemen have been called up. It's Bayley's time. What more could she accomplish down in NXT? When is she going to get the nod to go up? Because when she gets called up, she's going to be huge. She's going to be John Cena-ish. They're going to have plenty of armbands and wristbands and headbands that they could sell, hugger shirts. She's a merchandising goldmine. And the kids are going to love her. And that's all true. I can't dispute any of that. But think of this. Other than Asuka, who is down in NXT to make up the women's division besides Bayley? Oh yeah, you got Alexa Bliss there, who seems to have been there for a really long time. Oh yeah, you got Nia Jax there, who they're still developing. You got Billie Kay and Peyton Royce. You got Aaliyah, Liv Morgan, Tessa Blanchard shows up. You have women you're still trying to develop. But how do they develop if they don't have hands to develop with? And I understand it sounds like a raw deal for Bayley. But if Bayley leaves, what do you have left? You have Asuka. And that's it. I would not be surprised if at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn this year over SummerSlam weekend that you see Bayley regain her title and become a 2-time women's NXT champion. Because I don't know that she's getting called up. Just think about this. Let's once again, this is the purpose of this show. Let's put it into perspective. Where does Bayley fit in right now in the WWE Women's Division? Even if you split them amongst 2 shows. Right now, you're lucky if you can get 1 women's program on the air between Raw and SmackDown. So even if you split and you have a distinctive women's roster on Raw and a distinct women's roster on SmackDown, you just double 1. So you go from 1 to 2. And there's still a lot of women's talent up there that's not really getting its due. So Bayley now goes from being special. Bayley goes from being the NXT champion. Bayley goes from being the face of the women's division of the NXT brand. And she gets called up and is lost in the shuffle. I know we all want to see Bayley get called up. I know we all want to see Bayley get the respect that she is due. But do you want to see Bayley not on TV because they can't find anything to do with her? Or do you want to see Bayley continue to do what she does best in NXT? That's your dilemma. Do you want her to be a small fish in a big pond or a big fish in a small pond? Because if you want her to be called up, and I know we all do, right now, I don't know that it helps Bayley. Remember, we had weeks upon weeks upon weeks. I know some of it was due to injury. But where we couldn't get Sasha Banks on TV. We couldn't get Becky Lynch on TV. And she was perfectly healthy. Other than the shiner on her face. Natalya was MIA for months. So where does Bayley go if she gets called up? Just think about it. Little food for thought. Because I don't know that she is going to get that call as much as we want her to. I think somebody like Mojo Rawley is more likely to get called up to help rebuild the tag team division on the main roster and pair him up with Zack Ryder again with the Hype Bros and give them something to do than for somebody top notch, top tier in NXT getting that call up. So just think about that as we head into this draft, as we head into this brand split, the brand extension, whatever you want to call it, as we head into 2 distinct brands of wrestling between Raw and SmackDown, do not expect a gutting of NXT to fill out those 2 rosters. I understand that there's a lot of talent down there in NXT. It's still developmental. They have people we still haven't even seen on TV who are still working their way up. That doesn't mean they're going to scrap all the progress that they've made in order to fill out these two brands on the main roster. So get those expectations in check. I don't think they're gutting those rosters. And if they do, I'll be shocked when we get the draft in July. All right, a couple other things I want to talk about before we get out of here. One is Stephanie McMahon commenting on Brock Lesnar's return to the UFC. She had an interview with Business Insider where she said, quote, "In Brock Lesnar's case, it was really a special case that we are allowing him to do this fight. But like you said, it's not really a cross-promotional opportunity, but we are allowing him to participate in that fight. We are not supporting the fight necessarily, but again, it's not a competitor to us, and the more that our superstars, that's how we refer to our talent, the more they do outside of WWE, the more awareness it generates, and the broader the audience can be that is then brought back into our properties. So we recognize the value of that." And of course, this gets some of the IWC up in arms. Oh, look at how Stephanie McMahon is disrespecting Brock Lesnar. No. What Stephanie McMahon is doing is what I imagine any of the top tier of suits in the WWE would, which is acknowledge that Brock Lesnar is fighting in the UFC, but not selling. What they want is for Brock Lesnar to go to the UFC, have a good showing, and then hopefully draw UFC viewers back to the WWE when Lesnar steps into the ring at SummerSlam. What they don't want to do is send their viewers to UFC and possibly away from the WWE. So they're not really cross-promoting. They're not going out of their way to say, hey, go check out Brock Lesnar in the UFC. Go drop your $60-$70 on the UFC pay-per-view rather than take that money and put it into our coffers. I'm totally interested to see Brock Lesnar go to the UFC. I'm going to go out of my way to watch it because I know that it exists. But the WWE doesn't have to sell me on it because they want to make sure that I put money in their pockets, not the UFC's. So I think people are blowing Stephanie McMahon's comments about Brock Lesnar out of proportion. A lot of it makes sense, especially from a business standpoint. I don't necessarily know that the WWE is getting anything in return from the UFC for UFC 200 and their basically temporary lease on Brock Lesnar. But I think it does set the groundwork for them to call in favors down the line when the WWE wants something from the UFC in regards to their talent, whether it's Ronda Rousey or Ronda Rousey at some point down the line. So while the WWE will go out and sort of promote their talent elsewhere as a way to continue to build their brand, I don't know. As much as they want to say that the UFC isn't their competitor, it kind of is. And they don't want to send away to the competitor. They don't want people tuning into UFC and going, oh, this is real fighting. That other stuff's predetermined. I'll just stop watching that and I'll stay on to this. They don't want to send people towards a potential replacement. So there's nothing really out of line with what Stephanie McMahon had to say. What was kind of out of line, though, and we'll sort of close out the show with this, was their treatment of Dave Bautista. Dave Bautista had a really great interview with MLW Radio regarding sort of his comeback to the WWE around WrestleMania 30, as well as sort of his treatment and as it corresponds to the company's treatment of John Cena. Now, I had interviewed Dave Bautista, and you can check it out on YouTube. It's out there. The interview's out there with Dave Bautista for him to promote Guardians of the Galaxy. I had a chance to sit down and talk to him when that film was coming out. And he was very grateful of the opportunity that he had been given to become a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And as we know, Guardians of the Galaxy, one of the biggest hits that the Marvel Studios has had in their entire expansion of the MCU. But the other thing that I found striking from my talk with him, and this happened sort of after when we talked in private, was how sort of bothered and sad he was about his run in the WWE leading up to and through WrestleMania 30. If you remember, Bautista won the Royal Rumble upon his return, was set to square off one-on-one against Randy Orton at WrestleMania 30, was supposed to be seen as this triumphant returning babyface, and was sort of forced to turn a heel when the public rejected his return because of the popularity of Daniel Bryan. And the story eventually wrote itself, with Daniel Bryan being injected into the main event at WrestleMania 30, and as Michael Cole would say, WrestleMania turned into Yeselmania, with Daniel Bryan capturing the title at WrestleMania 30 in the Superdome in New Orleans. He was definitely affected by his run that time. And if you go and you listen to the MLW radio interview with him, it sort of gets a little bit more expansive than I had the chance to in my talk with him. Which is that it wasn't the smooth ride that he thought it was going to be. Right from the get-go, he was butting heads with creative. He thought he should come back as a heel because that's sort of how he left. And he thought sort of being this jerk heel would work better than sort of trying to come in as this pure babyface, which the fans rejected because he didn't feel like that at the moment. And he was right. He was right at how the fans reacted, and creative was wrong. Vince McMahon was wrong about it. And it didn't work. And as a result, he was sort of booed, and he was blamed for a lot of things. He was blamed for Daniel Bryan being held down. That the spot that Daniel Bryan should have had at the WrestleMania 30 was going to Bautista instead of Daniel Bryan. He was blamed for CM Punk sort of walking out because CM Punk was talking about how the WWE was bringing in these part-timers, these special attractions, these guys who aren't there all the time, when people like him who are there all the time aren't getting their top spots on the card, aren't getting that recognition. And the smart fans, the IWC, carried that over and put that blame on Bautista as if it was his fault. He was coming back to try and do something that he had a passion for. So it was a rough road. But I think one of the things that they sort of touched upon, and I think this speaks to sort of their blinders on mentality with who they want to handle and who they want to push towards the top, but also towards them living inside the WWE bubble, not having their pulse on what's going on outside of their world anymore. Is that John Cena was getting opportunities to star in WWE Studios movies. Did 12 rounds, did the Marine. And Bautista was starting to say, I would like to maybe try some of that. I have the acting bug too, that I would like to sort of scratch that itch. And while he saw that John Cena was getting those opportunities, when he went and pushed to maybe be considered, they were basically told, nope, that's not for you. Suit up, go back and wrestle. And that was sort of when he left originally the first time. To sort of see what he could do outside of wrestling. To see if he could chase Hollywood and make his mark there. Find his niche. But here's the part that kind of struck me. And I'm going to read a direct quote of this so that we don't get anything lost in translation. But I think this sort of just speaks to some of the larger problems that exist within the WWE currently. And this is once again following WrestleMania 30. He stuck around for one more pay-per-view where he did the job, did the business for Daniel Bryan, put him over. But there had been talks of him returning later in the year, maybe around SummerSlam in August, right around the time that Guardians of the Galaxy would be getting a release. That basically he might come back and, using the popularity of him being in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that would be a benefit to the WWE to cash in on and maybe cross-promote. Like they have with Sheamus recently being in the Ninja Turtle movie. The WWE is able to say, hey, look at our superstar as part of this big thing, and it increases the value of their product as a result. And Marvel also gets to reap benefits of it because the WWE gets to promote their product because they have a stake in it. They have an asset involved. So this is Batista's words. He said, quote, when I left, and I haven't talked to a lot of people about this, and I don't care if they're pissed about me saying something, but I wanted to come back and do SummerSlam. I wanted to come back around the time of the release of the film, around Guardians. And I said, wouldn't it be great if I was back and I was also in the number one movie in the world? And they kind of had a snicker. And there was, yeah, well, we don't know if the movie's going to be that good. And it was one of those moments. Literally, and I swear I'm not exaggerating. It was that, and it was a very uncomfortable moment where I think they were just kind of doubting me and laughing in my face. And I was like, okay. But it's not that I wanted to leave. I even wanted to come back. It's just that they're really difficult to work with and they're just not very flexible. This is a Marvel movie we're talking about. I realized that Guardians of the Galaxy was still largely an unknown. It wasn't Iron Man. It wasn't the Hulk. Wasn't Captain America or Thor. But it was a part of the Marvel brand. Which right now, next to Star Wars, is probably the biggest Hollywood intellectual property in show business right now. And the WWE looked at the prospect of joining forces with a Marvel juggernaut, a potential Marvel juggernaut, and said, no, thank you. We don't know if it's going to be any good. Are you fucking kidding me? Do they not understand how big Marvel is? Do they just not know? Once again, this goes sort of back to what I feel are major problems with WWE programming now, is that they don't know where pop culture is anymore. They once did. They once knew. They don't anymore. They don't know where the needle is moved in the mainstream to then potentially gear their program around similar sensibilities. They're stuck somewhere else where, while culture has moved forward. And look, I'll give them credit. They're up on social media. They know how that works. They're ahead of the content distribution model. They know that things are digital and they're on demand, which is why the network was a great idea and has really sort of come into its own. But when it comes to what people like, when it comes to where the popularity is, whether it's Marvel or it's Star Wars or it's Breaking Bad or it was Game of Thrones or it's The Walking Dead or UFC for that matter, they can't get their collective heads out of their WWE asses right now to take a good look around and see how the world is changing and how they maybe should change with it. And I thought this Bautista quote, this revelation, was just sort of the epitome of everything that's been going on in that company for the last however many years. Some food for thought as I send you on your way. All right, that's the go home cue then. Let's send you on your way, get you out of here, send you to the showers, and back out on the road. Let's get into the plugs. Look, make sure you hit up all the social media accounts for us, please. On Twitter at the IWC Show. At the IWC Show. That'll inform you anytime we have a new show that comes up and what we're talking about. So make sure you follow us there on Twitter. Also at Tiz Infamous. That's the official Twitter handle of the mothership. This is Infamous. So at Tiz, T-I-S, Infamous on Twitter. And myself as well at Infamous Kid for all my random ramblings and musings. My stream of consciousness in the written form. Follow me on Twitter at Infamous Kid. That's 2 Ds at the end. Over on Facebook, 2 pages for you to like. Facebook.com/TizInfamous and Facebook.com/BillyTheKid. Make sure you like both those pages for all the comment threads that we set out, all the discussion threads rather, and content notifications that we put out there. You want to be a part of those pages, so keep it real with those as well. You want to send an email our way, you can. theiwcshow@gmail.com. You have any comments, questions, or feedback that you want me to take a look at, I will read all the emails. So theiwcshow@gmail.com. Go ahead and send me an email anytime that you want. Podcasts can be found all over the place. Basically, if you can find a podcast as part of a distribution model, then Intelligent Wrestling Conversation is there to be found. So on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Google Play, on Blueberry, on SoundCloud, just do a search, look for Intelligent Wrestling Conversation, and you'll find us. So all we ask, make sure you subscribe to the show wherever it is that you find us, and rate the show. So rate or comment on the show. Send us that feedback. It helps us for placement on the show, and also helps spread the word of the show as well. So make sure you tell all your friends, particularly your wrestling fans, your intelligent wrestling fans. Remember, fanboys, they're not going to know what to do with this show. You can find me on a regular basis at joeblow.com. Also, thisisinfamous.com. And yeah, I've been your host, Billy Donnelly, and this has been Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. So have yourself a good 4th of July weekend. We'll be back next week to talk more wrestling. In the meantime, thank you for streaming, for downloading, for listening. Have a pleasant immediate future. I'm out. Peace. Intelligent Wrestling Conversation has been a podcast presentation of This Is Infamous.